Starting to record. We do record them and we do post them to the Kitchissippi Ward YouTube channel, and hopefully we should have that done by the end of the week. So anyone interested who wants to see it, who isn't here tonight, can send right to our office for a link, or you can just search Kitchissippi Ward on YouTube and find it that way. And having said that, just a reminder that if you don't want to be on camera and recorded, that you can just turn the camera off in the bottom left hand of your screen. And with that, I'm going to hand things over to Councillor Leacher to say a few words. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Alice. Good evening, everyone. It's good to see you, I guess. So normally I save this for the end of the discussion, but I wanted to bring it in this evening in terms of where we are in the process with this one, because I think it's important to understand what things look like moving forward. Things are a little bit different now since some provincial legislation. Applicants are coming to the community before they apply. This isn't a meeting that's required, but most of the applicants do want to have a community meeting. So they're pretty much always before the application is actually made. When that application is made, in this case it's for a rezoning that would allow greater density on the site from the, I guess the current R1 to an R4, the application is going to go to a city planner whose job it is to compare the application to the policies and plans in provincial and city planning that guide development in Ontario and in Ottawa. So the planner will take a look at the applicant's rationale. Why does the planner consider that the application that's being made is congruent with the official plan? They'll come up with a recommendation that will be voted on by first the Planning and Housing Committee at City Council and then City Council itself. And if the applicant or the community don't like City Council's decision, it will go to the Ontario Land Tribunal. And I say all that at the start because a lot of notes are coming into my office with respect to this application that are raising considerations that are not grounds for opposing the building that council can stand on. So it is legitimate to be opposed to this development, but the job the community needs to do is to try to find the official plan basis upon which they can couch their opposition, because those are the arguments you need to make to the city planner in an effort to sway that city planner to either recommend an approval or to support the application. So I just wanted to get into the process a bit at the outset of this one. Some of the notes that I've received are people who consider that, you know, an apartment building doesn't belong on a residential street, that renters shouldn't be in this residential neighborhood. And I want to help you put your best foot forward. Those sort of arguments are not official plan arguments that are going to be successful with City Council. And even if City Council agreed with those, which we probably would not, the Ontario Land Tribunal, to which the applicant would go if he refused this, would almost certainly not agree with them. So it's important to find the official plan grounds. And that said, I don't see how this is the kind of development that City Council is looking for. We've removed the parking requirements on these type of buildings very deliberately, and we are allowing this kind of what we call gentle density in areas like this that are adjacent to a lot of amenities and such, as a way to help more people live in the neighborhood, close to transit, close to stores, close to libraries, and all that good stuff. So a few comments at the outset, and of course I'm more than happy to get into those after the applicant's presentation. But the key purpose here tonight is to give you the opportunity to ask the questions about the development so that you are then better prepared to make your arguments to the city planner, who is going to need to make a recommendation to ultimately City Council. Alice, thank you. I think you're on mute.
Sorry. Okay, yeah. So with that, Paul, will hand it over to you, and please feel free to go ahead with your presentation. Thanks.
Thank you very much, everyone. Welcome. I will be putting up some PDF images in a minute or two. My name's Paul Robinson, planning consultant here on behalf of the owners. And with me this evening is Mr. Amjad Shendi, who is the designer who has designed the building. And it is his plans that are going to be on the screen. We did have a meeting. Amjad and I and the civil engineer did have a meeting initially with city planning. We went through that first initial meeting with them with the plans that are going to be shown this evening. We did get feedback. They were generally quite supportive of the application, feeling that it is within an official plan designation that allows this form of gentle intensification. The block is all within the same designation, and the zoning on this property is not in line with some of the official plan policies that are in effect. We have also met with some of the immediate neighbors, both in person, and we've also had some discussions, and we've also had a video meeting with a couple of neighbors that was coordinated through the councillor's office, and as well, Amjad and I have met with the councillor and his assistant on this file. As I can describe later, this is a multi-stage process, and officially the first notification of the application for the public would be when the sign goes on the property. And then at that point, there's a 90-day period in which the zoning application has to be heard by planning committee and a decision made. So a lot of the work being done to fine tune the design is being done prior to that. So the zoning application would be from an R1 zone, which is for single family residential, although R1 now does allow for up to 3 units through Bill 23. And it's likely that that will become 4 units as a condition of the city receiving federal housing initiative funding. That is likely to occur. And the rezoning would be to an R4 zoning, which would allow a low-rise apartment. I'm going to share my screen now. Okay. So this is just the cover page. This next image shows the property. The property is the property on the right-hand side with the 1-story white building with a porch. As you can see, there is a bit of a grade change between the ground floor of the house and the sidewalk and Garrison itself. So the property is on the south side of Garrison, immediately to the east of the Metro supermarket. And you can see on the left-hand side of the photo is the home that is immediately next door, which is at 100 Western Avenue. And we have had some discussions with Katie and Eric, who live at that property. There is a retaining wall along the frontage, and they have a greater retaining wall along their frontage, and we are going to be maintaining that sort of retaining wall. So that's the existing condition, as is this image, which shows the property full on. And you can see there is a driveway on the west side, a single car driveway with a board fence immediately to the west of that. And then the large, as you're probably all aware, the large sort of structure with really no windows at all is the Metro supermarket, which is approximately 7 to 8 meters in height. And it has its main focus on Wellington Street. So this is the zoning for the area, and this is quite important. The subject property is shown in a red area, and this property, number 10 Garrison, and then the 2 properties to the east, 100 and 102 Western Avenue, are also in the same zoning classification as our properties on the north side of Garrison, and there are 6 properties on the north side of Garrison. The remainder of the block bounded by Wellington, Carlton, Garrison, and Western Avenue is all in a TM11 zone. There's a couple of them have exceptions, but basically the TM11 zone is a traditional Main Street zone. It allows building heights up to 20 meters in height, which is approximately 6 stories. There, for up to 12 meters of that, there is a maximum 3-meter front yard setback, and you can build right to the lot lines. Once you go above 12 meters above the ground, then you have to step it back 2 meters. So there is quite a lot of building height capacity on the block, and it does not appear as though it has been used to date. The lands further to the east on the north side of Wellington, east of Western Avenue, are also in a TM11 zone. And then the properties on the east side of Western Avenue, north of that, where it says R3T, it's an R3T zone, which prior to the ability to have 3 units in a building was a zoning category that would come into play when a person was wanting to build a triplex on the property. So as you can see, you've got to the west the supermarket, and it has a large area of surface parking, which is somewhat unusual in this area of the city. And then you have 4 properties on the north side of Wellington Street, just west of Western Avenue, that have restaurants and some other retail uses. There are 2 homes immediately to the east, 100 and 102 Western Avenue. 100 Western Avenue was the original house on the property. There was a severance occurred, and 102 Western Avenue was built more recently. The property is fenced all around. And I will probably need to zoom in a bit. This is the survey plan of the property. You can see the home in the middle, and its porch and its retaining walls. Along the west side of the property, about halfway back, there is a garage, and there is a single car driveway. And there are also, the property is, the rear yard is fairly flat. It is fenced, and there is a tree near the property line of 102 Western Avenue that we're intending to retain. And the only other sort of issue that could come about at construction time is that a hydro wire from 100 crosses across the top right-hand corner of the property to a hydro pole on the other side of Garrison. So that will have to be, I believe, may have to get temporarily moved for the construction. And I will now minimize this a bit. And one more step. Okay, hopefully everyone can see this. This is the site plan. The area in pink would be the footprints of buildings. The main building is the 10-unit building. It has a footprint of about 2,400 square feet. So that's about 225 square meters. And at the rear, at the top right of the image, there is going to be one building that would be a combined bicycle storage building. So that would be enclosed, and also a garbage storage building that would have walls, a floor, and a roof. So the garbage and the bicycle access would come down the walkway on the west side of the property alongside the supermarket, and a person could get out to the sidewalk and Garrison itself that way. Because we have a building that is 10 units, and the Ontario Building Code says that when you have a building of 7 units or more, you need to provide barrier-free access to the building. We have one of the units of the 1-bedroom units, and one of the 2-bedroom units will be barrier-free units. And there will be a ramp that parallels Garrison between the property line and the front wall of the building that will be the access for a person in a wheelchair. And there's also going to be some steps in the midpoint of the frontage. within the building itself, there would be some steps to get out into the first floor, and there's also a sort of a very small lift that would be for a person in a wheelchair. And obviously the 2 units have internal modifications that would be appropriate for a person in a wheelchair. There are 4 2-bedroom units and 6 1-bedroom units along the, I'm going to show this in a minute. At the front of the property, there would be balconies, except for on the ground floor close to where the ramp is, but the rest would have balconies. And then at the rear, there would be a balcony on the units on the left-hand side of the building. We're also going to have a landscaped area in the rear and some new planting, and we're intending to keep the existing tree. That will be a landscaped area for the residents, as would be the area on the left-hand side of the building, which is the east side. And that's 1.5 meters, so that's 5 feet in width. And there's also a landscaped area at the front of the building, and a small area of landscaping behind the garbage room and bicycle parking, which is a zoning requirement. Those buildings cannot be right on the property line. So we're proposing 6 bicycle parking spaces. We could look at that some more to see if there's an ability to get some more in other areas. People, many people in this area, if they have a very valuable bike, they want to have it in their unit themselves. The property is 15 meters by 30 meters, so that's 50 feet wide by 100 feet in depth. The building height proposed is 11 meters, so it's 3 stories plus a basement. 11 meters is about 35 feet. The building would be 3.07 meters, which is 10 feet from the front lot line. The side yards are 5 feet. And then the rear is 9.15 meters, which is 30 feet. So it has a 30-foot by 50-foot rear yard, and those the side lot line and the rear lot line would be fenced. We are required in the R4 zoning, it's very specific zoning, required to have 25% of the units to be 2-bedroom units. We're providing 40% of those. We exceed the required amount of soft landscaping in both the front and the rear yard in the zoning classification that we're seeking, which is an R4 UC zone. So I will go to some of the architectural. The top image is the north elevation, so that's the view from Garrison, with the supermarket would be on the right-hand side, and you can see in the background is where the garbage room and bicycle parking room would be. And then, so there would be units with balconies on the left-hand side on the ground floor, second floor, and third floor. The basement has got a window well. Similarly, on the right-hand side, the third floor and second floor have got balconies. The first floor, it's not possible to do that due to the ramp and the area that you need for that. The building is 11 meters in height, and that is shown by the red line near the top of that image. Similarly, going to the rear, or the view from the backyard, looking back towards Garrison and the rear wall of the building, we've got an exit and entry to the building at that point. And then the units on the right-hand side would have balconies, and we can discuss, or it's open for discussion about any screening elements that would assist on this project in order to provide privacy for adjacent neighbors. And then this is the east elevation. So that is on the right-hand side would be Garrison, and you can see there is a little bit of a step down where you have the retaining wall adjacent to the sidewalk, and you can see the balconies there. And then there are some windows along that side, and then you can see on the left-hand side, the sides of the balconies and the proposed new fencing and tree planting that would be there. And then the west elevation is flipping around. That's the view as if you would be on the supermarket side, and you can see on the right-hand side the fencing there, the side of the building and the balconies. And then you can see on the left-hand side would be getting towards Garrison, and you can see that the ground does slope a bit down there. I think the grade change is, I think it's about 50 centimeters on the property. I'm going to now, this is an image showing the front view of the proposed building, and you can see the details that have gone into this building. We've got windows in the central staircase, and some differentiation between the left-hand side and the right-hand side of the image. And you can see the home at 100, and then in the background 102. The area in red is what is permitted right now as of right on the rest of the block. So you can build on the supermarket side quite a bit higher than what is there now and closer. And we've also put into some of the step backs that apply on the zoning that's in place right now on the rest of the block as you get higher. But that would be what 20 meters would look like. So there is a lot of existing as of right zoning on this block, and we feel that the proposal before you is quite a sensitive transition between what is permitted and could be happening versus what is existing in the area. This is another view looking, I guess, from the corner of Garrison and Western Avenue, looking to the southwest towards the corner of the building, and you can see the as of right permitted height limits in the zoning in the red outline. Another view taken a bit further back and showing more along what could be permitted along Wellington Street, and then what could be permitted in the background behind the client's property on the supermarket property. Here's the supermarket property and our client's property, and the two homes on Western Avenue. And that is the presentation that I have for you today. We are at a fairly, I'll go back to the site plan, and then we could maybe, if there's questions, I can switch drawings from there. As the process has changed, and we go through 2 or 3 iterations of the plan with the planning department. We did have a meeting with them with these plans, and the civil engineer was there. And at the end of that meeting, which was also attended by the community, a representative of the community association, and the indication we got at that meeting was that they would be happy with us going from the first meeting to the third meeting. So they gave us a set of criteria of drawings and studies and reports that we need to do. And upon submission of those, they would be in a position to review it and then schedule it for a zoning application. Many applications go through meeting 1, 2, and 3, but ours was indicated that we could go from meeting number 1 to meeting number 3. They were in support of the application in general. One thing on this property is that this area of the city, when you have 12 units or less, you do not need on-site parking. And the zoning that we are seeking has a minimum lot area if you were to consider any parking, we are just above that. And based on the proximity of this property to Wellington Street and other transit infrastructure, and the fact that there is a supermarket right next door, we feel that this is a property that parking is not something that the client wants to have. And any parking, if it was to be there, would be in the rear yard, and there would be a lot of it's very hard to get surface parking on a property of this size, and to have a reasonable size building, and to have a reasonable amount of soft landscaping. So that's where the application is. We have to, under this new process, the zoning process of it all brings into it the issues related to site plan, architecture, landscape plans, and civil engineering plans. I believe in the past, a lot of those details were not required at the zoning stage and were pushed to the site plan stage. But now in the province, any building of 11 units or more is the trigger for site plan approval. This is a 10-unit building. So this does not go through site plan approval, but the level of detail of drawings that we need to provide is quite a lot. And many of the items that were covered in the site plan process are now going to be reviewed and fine-tuned through the zoning process. So that is the presentation that I have for you today. And I'm open for questions. Amjad and I are open for questions. And I can hopefully flip to the appropriate page in the submission, in the presentation materials, and we can try and answer your questions. Thank you.
Thanks, Paul. So just a reminder to folks that we're asking people to submit questions using the Q&A function, which you will see at the bottom of your screen. So if you just want to type in a question, I can read them out, and Paul or Amjad can answer, or where appropriate, Jeff or Rob. So please feel free to submit your questions. Not seeing any right now. Okay, I see one. It says, if this goes ahead, how long is construction expected to take? Paul or Amjad, do you know the answer to that?
Probably it would take around anywhere between 12 to 16 months to be completed from start to end.
And if I can add, realistically, since we've submitted on round 1, and we could be going from round 1 to round 3 and then on to the zoning hearing. Realistically, summertime might be a more realistic time for the zoning hearing. And then there's obviously the building permit process. So it's a very long process.
Thank you. Next question. Will the units be rentals or for sale?
Rentals.
What kind of studies is the city requesting as part of this rezoning application?
Okay, I can answer that.
Okay.
So, environmental site assessment, getting that done now. A geotechnical study, a noise study, site servicing, building elevations need to be filed. There is a different sort of a level of detail that the city can now review those against, but we are going to be filing those. Landscaping plan, survey plan, which I provided in the submission document, planning rationale, a site plan, which is what is on the screen right now, an urban design brief, And I believe that is it. There may be a tree inventory study done, but that may be at the building permit stage.
Paul, if I may, anticipating what I assume will be one of the next questions is all of those studies, when you actually officially file an application, all of those documents are made public as part of the application file on the DevApp site, on the city's applications website.
Yes, but as I am finding myself, because up until Bill 23 came about and the city changed the way that they process development applications, when an application was submitted initially, then the drawings went up on DevApps. Now, my understanding is that the drawings only go onto DevApps once for a zoning application, they go onto DevApps once the 90 days begins, I believe.
Yeah, so once
Yes.
once it's deemed complete.
So the drawings that we submitted for the pre-consultation meeting that we had with staff and the community association, they have not appeared on DevApps.
No, but there's no application yet, right?
Correct.
So, but once the application is made and you've got an application file that's deemed complete, all those files will go online.
That is correct.
Yeah, we're all navigating this new process, obviously. So, okay, thank you.
Yep.
The next question is a comment from James. He says, I appreciate the consideration for gentle density and the bike parking. I understand it's a change, but these sorts of development are what we need everywhere. Thanks for sharing this. Okay, on to the next question. Where will any residents with cars likely park?
Well, when people are considering moving into this building, it will be very clear and evident in any lease agreement that there is no on-site parking for them. And I believe that there is a limited time on Garrison that people can park. They are not people who have a car or would not be attracted or not, it would not be the place for them to live. There are many places like this, increasingly more and more places like this in the city where small buildings like this are being built, many of them in this ward where parking is not provided, and they would be made quite clear to them that there is no on-site parking. Maybe the councillor can confirm whether parking permits are permitted on this street. I don't think they are.
I don't think so either, under the current rules. So it's mostly an R1 and an R3 neighborhood. So most of the homes have their own private parking. And when that's the case, usually it doesn't qualify for permit parking. But that's going to be part of the comprehensive zoning bylaw is, as we see more of these no parking buildings go up, we may have to broaden consideration for parking permits. But at the outset, I would be surprised if this were allowed to be a permit parking street. And that would require a petition that received 2/3 concurrence from the property owners on the block. So I think it's exceedingly unlikely. Once again, this week, as so many weeks, people have called my office. They've moved into a building where the landlord has not been straightforward with them to tell them that there is no parking and that parking is very challenging. And they're seeking my help in terms of trying to find something for them. And once again, we're in the position of having to tell them there is no help we can provide you. And people move out of these buildings to find accommodation that has parking, which is, let's face it, the majority of housing in this city. So I'm sure, Paul, we would have talked about this when we had the meeting, you and I, but I'm looking for the landlords to do more than just put in the lease that there is no parking. I'm looking for the landlords to be very upfront with people to say, if you have a car, there are winter parking bans, there are time limits on the street, neighbors will call bylaw if you are parked overtime. don't try to move in this building if you have a car. I will just say, and I'm sorry, normally I have access to all the questions that are being asked, and I don't see them here just because the different devices I'm using tonight. But like I anticipate that many of your folks are going to be young professionals like Natalie and I were when we moved into the Julian Apartments, and we lived there for years. It was the best neighborhood in the city for a younger couple like us, living carless, having to walk to the Metro and walk to the Giant Tiger, and back then the Byway, and go drinking at the Eight Bells. And it's going to be a difficult place for somebody who has a car to try to live, though, because they're going to find the hassle and stress is too much.
You end up, if you move into one of these, it's like I hear about people in office buildings who don't have a dedicated parking space, and they're always looking out the window of their office to where they park the car to see if the bylaw people are coming. So it's not a good place. If you have a car, this is not the place for you. And when you mention about zoning and R1 and R3, the city is undergoing a new zoning bylaw. I'm hearing that sometime this month, the first version of it is supposed to come out. I don't know if it is or not. We're at the 5th of March. I'm sure there'll be many people reading it who are interested in that kind of thing. The scheduled implementation of it is, my understanding is the 4th quarter of 2025. And the indications, I think it's fairly safe to say that properties like this close to a street like Wellington Street would be having more permissive building heights and density types in them. And the idea of no parking or a greater threshold for no parking is not out of the question in this, due to the proximity of this property to a traditional Main Street zone. So.
All of that is correct. I'm anticipating a first draft of that new bylaw at the very end of the month.
Okay.
Yeah.
Some light reading.
We'll all be busy.
Okay, the next question and comment is also related to parking. It asks, are there similar sized buildings in densely settled neighborhoods that have no parking? How has this worked out? I simply cannot imagine that not a single person in any of these 10 apartments will own a car.
There's, if you drive around parts of Hintonburg and West Wellington, I know there's a number of them. I was involved in one myself. It does have parking. It was 26 or 28 units, and it has 7 parking spaces at Pinney and Armstrong. There's other buildings on Carruthers and Armstrong that are being built now that have either no parking or they just have 1 or 2 parking spaces for many more units than this. The impetus for it all is that we need intensification in the city and this kind of size of unit is the type of unit where people would not own a car. You've got the shops right there on Wellington Street. You've got a supermarket right next door. That's often the big complaint is people who don't have parking. They say, well, how am I going to go get my groceries? Well, it's right next door, and it's a fairly large grocery store. There's Councillor Leeper can probably indicate some of the ones that he sees through site plan or rezonings or committee of adjustment applications where it's units of buildings of about this size without any parking being provided.
Yeah, we're seeing more of them in Hintonburg, which is at our 4 neighborhood. We're starting to see, but I'm not sure any have been built in Westboro with the new R3R. So there is that hierarchy that we're starting to see evolve where there are the R4 neighborhoods. They're not going to be called R4 anymore. I think they're N2 or something in the new bylaw. But the edge of the neighborhoods, we're anticipating seeing more of these no parking buildings because you can't get the density you need and preserve green space and have parking. Something has to give. I'm just thinking about the Julian Apartments, for example, which I believe has 3 or 4 parking spots, and the vast majority of people in that building live car-free. In Ottawa Centre, of people who live in multi-unit buildings, 50%, and this was back in 2011. 50% of people in multi-residential apartments, multi-residential buildings don't have cars. There are thousands and thousands of people who are living in Ottawa Centre. There are thousands of people who are living in Kitchissippi Ward who don't have a car. So I know I won't get into a long debate about it tonight, because I know that every time one of these buildings comes up, we go through the same debate. There are some folks who do try to move in with cars. They wind up calling my office. We tell them there's no help that we can provide them, and they move as soon as their first year's lease is up. But I don't want to go around in circles on that one. I know there's a lot of objection to the fact that there are no cars. The planner on the file will be very aware that that is a deliberate choice on the part of City Council, and I doubt that it will weigh into the decision that they make to recommend this building in the report that they wind up writing.
Thank you. Okay, next question. What's the environmental impact of this low-rise building with power and energy needs for 10 additional units? And can our sewage system handle this?
Okay. As part of one of the submission requirements is a servicing capacity study, where the civil engineer assigned who's on our team will be looking at the capacity and the diameter of the sewers and their capacity, and they will run models as to what the outflow is going to be from into the sewers from this project. And they've done some cursory review, and they don't have any issues with it. There is capacity in the sewers, and similarly, typically it comes out at building permit stage in terms of things like natural gas network and the hydro capacity. Those typically come about at building permit. I'm not aware of any issues on that. In terms of the environment impact, one of the items that needs to be addressed is a phase 1 environmental site assessment, and that work is just beginning now. So those are requirements that are sort of deliverables for the zoning application for this project. Thank you.
Paul, forgive me for jumping in again. And once again, I don't have access sort of to the questions that are being asked in advance, but so the building footprint is significantly larger. We're concerned in the ward about storm water runoff. How are you managing stormwater on this site? Do you have
MJ?
a plan for cisterns?
MJ, do you want to answer that?
Yeah, so for the roof, of course, we'll have a flat roof, and then we'll collect the water and distribute it directly to the stormwater management servicing pipes located at Garrison Street. So that will be taken care of. And of course, the lot will be self-contained in terms of the management of stormwater. We'll make sure there is no runoff to other properties once this project is developed. And all stormwater will be self-contained within the property and then directed to the city services.
Yeah, it's a growing concern, but I know city staff are looking at that very carefully. So, and if there is a stormwater pipe capacity issue, staff will ensure that, the city won't allow this to move forward until they're convinced that the capacity does in fact exist. One of the other questions was around hydro, and I think that's a really good question as well. You'll see in Westboro, where there's been a lot of intensification, hydro is doing a ton of work to try to upgrade the power grid in Westboro, because we are getting to the point where there is a need for more power because of the growing population. But that work does happen if it proves to be an issue. So right now in Wellington West, it is still a fairly, it's not a super dense neighborhood at this point, unlike some of the stuff in Westboro. So it's probably not as big a concern.
Okay, now we have a couple of questions regarding trees. The first one reads, you mentioned trees. Is this development compliant with the tree bylaw? How does it intend to deal with parking? Well, that we've talked about. Is this development minimally intrusive to sunlight, privacy, and views issues for the two homes on Western Avenue?
In terms of the view aspect, we have a 1.5 meter or 5 foot setback of the building, to the property line, to the adjacent properties. And then I believe the property at 100 Western Avenue is just under 3 meters to their property line. So it's probably about 4.5 meters. So that's about 15 feet. And then as you can see, the rear wall of the building extends beyond 100 Western Avenue and just a small portion of 102 Western Avenue. There is a tree on our client's property close to the fence of 102 Western Avenue. We're intending to keep that. There's also a tree in the top right-hand corner of the property, but it's actually, I believe, on a property on Wellington Street. It's kind of entangled in the fences. We're intending to keep that. In terms of, there's not really any balconies on the east side of the building facing 100 and 102 Western Avenue. We have one balcony, area of balconies at the rear of the building, and it's close to 102 Western Avenue, but we're amenable to having some screening there so that there's no privacy overlook. There will be a fence along the perimeter of the property. Those are usually somewhere in the range of 5 to 7 feet, a wood board fence. And then there is going to be new planting and there's new landscaping. Right now, the rear yard is not very orderly. So that is all going to be cleaned up. And there'll be new planting areas in the rear. We're showing a new tree with some planting around it and the existing tree, some landscaped areas, and then along the front, some more formalized flower beds and some landscaping there. I think does that cover the question?
I think so, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Another tree related question. It's more specific to Garrison though, and more of a comment. Reads, speaking of tree inventories, there are very few trees on Garrison Street. Are there any plans for a green roof? And a broader question for Jeff or the city, perhaps Garrison Street can be looked at more broadly to properly construct sidewalks with green space for trees to be planted. So it doesn't sound like there are plans for a green roof. Amjad, you mentioned there's going to be a flat roof, correct?
Yes, so I wish I can do that, but with that, there will be some cost involved, and that will definitely alternate the idea of providing the city of Ottawa tenants with affordable units to rent, because that would increase the price of the construction of the building dramatically to add some green roofs.
I think in terms of the sidewalk, I believe, based on this photo, it looks like the sidewalk from the sort of steps where there's a railing going up to the landing, but to the left of that sidewalk looks fairly new. And this is a street where right now you've got the property line, which is somewhere around where that retaining wall is, and then you've got a narrow grassed area, then the sidewalk, and then the actual road itself. When this picture was taken, there were no cars parked there, but when I've been there, there are oftentimes cars parked parallel parking there. So unless the city wanted to narrow the actual travel portion, having a grassed area for new tree planting would be quite an undertaking.
It's not impossible.
No.
Sorry, well, I'm trying to pull up the street view on that one, but Garrison is very wide.
Yeah.
I suspect, and I've managed to pull up the street view now. Yeah, it's really wide. I suspect that when we go to rebuild the street, that we would actually wind up narrowing it. I wouldn't suggest that we would be able to narrow it to the point where you could have a verge with street trees, but you could almost certainly have some sort of, well, at least a green verge, maybe some planters and some bulb outs and such. But I'm sorry, I don't know when Garrison would be up for reconstruction. But,
One idea that I hear a lot is a design option called it's a Dutch word called a Warnerf.
Yeah.
Where it's a way to slow down traffic with landscaped bulb outs and so forth.
Yeah, we're making progress on that. We've adopted as a council the policy of rebuilding. When we rebuild our residential streets, we rebuild them to calm traffic to 30 kilometers per hour by design. And usually that means putting in things like bulb outs and narrowing the street. And so I'm not sure that it would get us to the point where there are street trees. And of course, the houses are built very close to the sidewalk here. But it certainly would be possible to narrow it and potentially get some planters and such in there. But I don't know that that's anytime coming up soon. We're doing a lot of rebuilds every year in the ward, but it's going to be a long time before they all get done.
Okay. We have a question about how will snow removal be dealt with?
Well, the only snow removal would be for the, and I'll go back to the site plan. The only area that needs snow removal is the ramp at the front of the building and the porch, and then the pedestrian path along the side of the building. And some of that could be put into the rear yard. That area is only 1.5 meters wide, so that's going to have to probably be done in person, right, on foot. There is no driveway and there's no parking, and that is what is the big demand on snow removal operations. So it's likely going to be some of it will be put into the backyard, and some of it may have to be carted, taken off site. But I don't see that as much of an issue. And certainly it wouldn't have been this winter.
Okay. We have a question for Jeff. How is the relative importance of competing official plan objectives determined? For example, those to meet housing requirements versus those to protect the existing residents and affordability?
You know what, that's probably more than I want to get into in the space of how long we've got left here. The affordability question, City Council will suggest that density is one of the keys to affordability. We don't make neighborhoods more affordable by keeping housing out. We, in theory, increase affordability by having greater density, greater supply, which in theory should discipline pricing. There is nothing in the official plan about protecting residents. There are transition requirements that we speak about, but the character of the neighborhood as a neighborhood of single detached homes is not something that this official plan, or frankly the previous one, protected. You know, the new official plan contemplates that blocks like these are going to be intensified at a low-rise scale in a low-rise neighborhood, moving up to a higher condition along the traditional main street. So basically the official plan says we're going to have intensification of our low-rise neighborhoods at a low-rise scale. We're going to intensify through mid-rise construction on our main streets. And, you know, if they had assembled if they had assembled all the parcels behind the metro, there's no question they would probably be able to, you know, they'd be able to put in 9 stories all the way to Garrison fairly easily. And then we're putting our tallest, densest buildings near the LRT stations. At the highest level, that's how the city intends to accomplish the intensification it needs to keep the development for 400,000 people over the course of the next 25 years, majority, 51% within the already serviced areas. And we want people in neighborhoods like this one to be a little bit denser because it is closer to the amenities. Paul spoke about the amenities that are nearby. It doesn't do us as much good to intensify in the heart of Avalon, where people are still going to have to drive to everything they want to go. This is the kind of area close to main streets, close to amenities, close to transit, where we need the intensification to happen. So, I mean, it's a case you can put to the planner, right? If you feel that there are official plan policies that speak to the character of a neighborhood, and I can guarantee you that you're not going to find a lot, put that to the planner. But I also know that the planner is unlikely to be very sympathetic to those arguments, and that the arguments in favor of intensification for the environmental, for the economic benefits are going to hold sway, especially in this environment in which we want more housing to be built, not less.
Thanks, Jeff.
Alice, there's somebody called Ian who has a raised hand.
Okay.
Right.
Sorry, one second.
We want to get through lots of questions. So
Yeah,
just ask
so
if
I
Ian
think we're
can
just-
type his question into the chat or into the
Yeah,
Q&A,
And
please.
I'm not seeing, I don't know, I'm not seeing that raised hand, but yeah, Ian, if you can please type your question in, and I will look for it and read it out. Okay, next question. What is the anticipated market for these units? Is it young folks who cannot afford a car and retired people who do not want one?
Both.
Okay. Will pets be allowed in the building?
I'm not a pet owner myself, so it's never been an issue, but I don't believe that you can. I don't know if you can restrict a rental apartment building to have pets or not. And to me, there's a hierarchy of pets between noisy dogs and a very quiet hamster. So I don't know I don't know if there is a restriction. I don't know if you, Alice, or Jeff have run into that yourself. I don't think you can restrict them.
I'm sorry, that's a landlord-tenant issue that's outside the purview of the city. I'm not an expert. I believe that landlords have the right to prohibit pets, but it's not something I'm an expert in because it is a landlord-tenant issue.
Okay.
Okay, next question regarding trees. Again, is there any possibility of keeping the two large pine trees on the east/north corner?
The location of those is one of them is right on the westerly of those two. I'm looking at, I can see it because it's covering my entire screen. The westerly one of those two is basically right on the wall of the building. And then the easterly is in the 1.5 meter area. And the building would be a lot smaller if we were to preserve those. It's not so much the location of the trunk, it's the critical root zone of these trees, which I believe often has a ratio of 10:1. So if the tree is got a 50 centimeter diameter, the critical root zone is usually 5 meters, and it would be a much different building, and that's not the intent. So that I understand that is an issue I run into myself on many files where it's competing between intensification and trees. But if there is to be much in the way of any intensification on this property, those 2 trees are not going to be part of the project.
Okay, we have a couple of questions about the rentals and rental targets. The first one says, do you have an anticipated monthly rental target for the 1 and 2 bedroom units? And then we have another question related. Will the rentals be affordable / subsidized unit?
What is a rental fee today in 2024 may not be a rental fee in 2025 or 2026. Maybe Amjad could speak about the sort of where these units would fall in the sort of hierarchy of rental ranges, whether it's. Go ahead.
Well, from technical point of view, this building has been designed in a nice way. First of all, to have some nice architectural elements to it, but at the same time to keep it very affordable and straightforward construction. For example, not to have an expensive features, not to have parking or underground parking in it, not to have an elevator as well in it, to keep it in the affordability low range as much as we could. And as you said, Paul, cannot expect how much will be the prices in the next year or in the next couple of years from now. But what I can assure, it's a straightforward build, made out of wood construction, conventional wood framing, just like any other single story or double story house. So that's what we were trying to do. Other than that, I cannot really be the real estate expert to give the exact amount of how much would be the rental price for these units.
The question was with respect to whether or not this would be subsidized or RGI housing. I don't think that's your intent, right? This is entirely market rent housing.
That is correct.
Okay, we have a couple of garbage related questions. Number 1, will the garbage be dumpsters or can? How big would it be? And also, how will garbage needs be handled for persons using wheelchairs?
The room is 9'3" by 6 feet, or 55 square feet. So that's about 5 square meters, and I believe the capacity is 12.2 cubic meters. That is based. There's criteria in the city about how much room you need per unit. That room is all at the same level. A person in a wheelchair would go out the front door and would go down the ramp when they leave their unit, and they would go along the side of the building and into the building. So there's no steps for them that they need to get to and from the garbage room. And there is, because of the fact that the garbage room is not in the building, and there will have to be property management company or a property management company would have to bring the garbage to the street edge, likely the night before or the morning of garbage pickup, or if they elect to go with a private pickup, then the private waste management people would wheel the bins out to the curb. So on buildings like this, the city will pick up if you bring it to the curb. And the garbage room will have, it'll have 4 walls, and it'll have a floor, and it'll have side walls, and it will have a roof.
Okay. Okay, we have a question around fencing. Hold on. Is there enforcement for screening elements like fences? No. Not sure if they're asking.
There is, my understanding is that there is no technical requirement to have fencing, but we would want to have fencing here. There is a maximum height. I believe it's 7 feet or a bit over 2 meters. So that is what is we're proposing. We have not got all the fine details on the fencing yet, but the side lot line and the rear lot line would have fencing. There is fencing there now, but it's it needs, in many instances, it needs a new fence, and the construction would probably do damage to the fences.
Okay, we have a question about the gym. Is the gym absolutely necessary? Could the garbage and bicycles go in that space?
Do you want to answer that, Amjad?
Now for feasibility, to move bicycle all the way down to the basement and take them out, and also to take the garbage bins in and out all the time from the building is not that much feasible, and that's why we decided to keep that at a grade level for easier access. And so that's why we decided to keep that. Plus, a gym is more to motivate people, to encourage people to practice more some of their healthy habits while working from home, and that's why we have decided to include the gym in this building as an amenity area, and it's an amenity feature to the building itself.
Okay, next question says, as this lot goes from an R1 to R4, will we see other homes on the street and neighboring streets move to this type of intensification? Also, what will be done to minimize debris and noise during construction for neighbors? So two very different questions.
I can try and answer I can try and answer both, but Councillor Leeper may want to add on the first part. In terms of will this trigger other applications on the block and surrounding areas? There is nothing there. That is not really the purview of our assignment. That things, and sometimes if an application goes forward, that gets the impetus for somebody else to make an application. But I can't, my Amjad or I cannot control what occurs where in the nearby area. Councillor Leeper may know of other projects that are coming on board nearby. In terms of debris and construction noise, there are mandated hours of construction. I think it starts at 7 or 8 in the morning till I'm not sure what time it finishes. And I think you can also build on the weekends, but not many people do. And there's more limited hours on the weekends. And in terms of debris, the construction fencing is supposed to buffer a lot of that from surrounding properties. Once the building is ready to get started, the contractor will be making his contact details known to the nearby neighbors. So maybe Councillor Leeper, if you had any insight as to other applications in the area, or your knowledge, if one application goes in an area, does that trigger others?
Yeah, so it's a good question. I don't think so. This application for an R4 this close to Wellington Street is not surprising. In the new zoning bylaw that is proposed at the end of March, for which I'm hoping to have a very precise zoning map by May, we'll have a better understanding of where staff are proposing to draw the line between, and I'm going to use today's terminology, the R3 and the R4. So the low-rise neighborhoods that are on the interior, and that's a very amorphous word, of the neighborhood, across the inner urban transect, so that's within the urban core neighborhoods, will probably be given zoning that looks something like Westboro's. The new Westboro R3R zoning was designed to bring the zoning up to date with what the new official plan was expected to say, and allows singles, semis, triplexes, and rows. And most of the interior of Westboro in the R3R area is that zoning, but there is an edge that they consider to warrant denser development. The question that you and I will, or the answer, I guess, that you and I will be watching for is, where do they draw that line? So for example, and forgive me, I'm just looking at my map here, at the corner on the interior of the block on Gilchrist, I'm imagining that would be the equivalent, that will be proposed as the equivalent of the Westboro, the new R3. At Gould and Western on the east side, I expect that will also continue to be an R3. All the R1, that is from Scott to Wellington, Western to Island Park, that will all be upzoned to some sort of the R3. There's not going to be any R1 left in the new zoning bylaw. But where do they define there being an edge that is going to take greater density? So in Westboro, there are a couple of corners where they determined that it could handle an R4. Churchill, Kirkwood, Byron got R4s. So the edge of the neighborhood, we won't know what they're proposing is the edge until we see a zoning map associated with the new zoning bylaw. And then in 2025, something will pass. I don't think anyone would apply with an expectation of being approved for one of these R4s today, much further away from Wellington and Scott than this one is. I suspect that Paul has a very high degree of expectation that he'll be successful with the R4 here, because that's in line with what the official plan is calling for. It becomes considerably less certain as you move deeper away from the edge. So it's not much of an answer for you, but the fact that an R4 is approved on this lot shouldn't be surprising, and it shouldn't serve as a precedent if you're deep within the neighborhood.
If I could just add one thing, one of the comments we got from planning department when we had the pre-consultation meeting was, planning staff generally support the proposed rezoning. Garrison Street appears to be a good dividing line between the stable residential area and Wellington Street. This appears to be a good site for transition.
Yeah, so like I'm not sorry, I'm not on mute. This would be a surprising application on the north side of Garrison. Like, just objectively speaking, I think the planners who work for the developers would be a little more reticent to apply for an R4 on the north side of Garrison, unless the new zoning bylaw creates new zoning that permits it, because I don't think they would have a very high expectation of success on the north side of Garrison, on the east side of Western. Although once you get into the lots that are sort of 1, 2, 3 lot depth away from Wellington, then I think you might start to see some expectation in behind the 9-story that's allowed on Wellington. I think you might see the planners asserting that they're justified in seeking an R4 on the edge. But as you move in closer, it becomes a lot less certain. This has less to do with precedent than it does with what the official plan says. Again, you have to make that official plan case, and it gets complicated, but yeah, it'll be interesting to see though. So stay tuned in March to see what the official plan calls for by way of the new zones and how far away, what constitutes an edge. And then we'll have the more precise zoning map. I'm pressing to get that for May.
Okay, I'm going to go back to another parking related question. Given that there are no on-site parking required or provided and that parking on the south side of Garrison is pretty much maxed out on a daily basis, what mitigating actions might be taken by the city to accommodate or manage the parking situation on the street?
I'll just be blunt, like I always am on parking. Parking is going to get, the demand for parking is going to climb, and parking congestion is going to get worse. There is one tool left in the toolkit to try to manage parking congestion on Wellington, and that is paid parking. And that will probably exacerbate at least some increased demand for the non-paid parking on the streets that are adjacent to Wellington. So I don't want to be anything but blunt on that. The competition for parking is going to likely get worse on all of our streets in all of the inner urban transect as we move forward.
Okay, next question. I think it's more of a comment, but Jeff, I'll let you decide. It says, Jeff, if this is not successful, then are we not risking more towers that none of us want?
Interesting question. So again, putting on my sort of understanding how the planning process works and understanding what the official plan says. If this were refused and the developer walked away from the site, this is the densest that anyone could reasonably ask for without assembling a lot more property. So let's say the developer walks away from this one. And I'm sorry, I don't know if the developer owns this one or has just optioned it. Owns it outright? Okay. But I mean, there's always the possibility that if we refused it and somehow that refusal was upheld by the OLT, that you might sell, right? If somebody were to assemble the diner, Carolyn's Place, all the different properties there, yeah, you could probably see a 9-story building on Wellington at some point that would transition down to something like 6 on the Garrison side. And of course, there's always the potential that someone like a Metro may want to try to assemble the entire site and build a much taller and denser development, because again, they'd be allowed 9 stories across much of it. But in this case, given that an assembly is going to be challenging, I don't think a refusal on this would lead necessarily to a proposal for towers instead. Someone would have to assemble it all, and that's going to be challenging. I think the R4 on the south side of Garrison here is about as dense as most of the credible planners in Ottawa would be willing to try to push for.
Thank you. Okay, we have a question. Has the city provided any formal or informal approval of your plans?
No, they have indicated that they are generally in support of it, but there needs to be the full set of studies and reports prepared and filed, and they need to be in a position they're in agreement with them before they would schedule this for a zoning application.
So none of it's formal at this point, and we are still navigating, sort of the new process of the 3 pre-consults. What I would suggest to you, Paul, is that if there were a red flag that was something other than a discovery at the last minute, sewers couldn't handle the additional flow, they have not given you any indication that this is heading for a refusal recommendation. It sounds like they have been supportive the whole way, right?
That is correct.
So just for those who are watching this evening, it is the planner's job to write a recommendation as to whether or not the Planning and Housing Committee should vote to refuse or accept this. Generally, those reports don't move forward until the planner is in a position to recommend approval. So when the application goes live, when there is an actual application upon which people can comment, if someone comes up with a novel planning grounds based argument, the planner on the file is going to be bound to consider that, and they'll make a determination as to whether or not they can still contemplate or support an approval recommendation. So it's not done yet, but if my caution to residents is that on the planning grounds, certainly if this was grasping in terms of where the official plan is, Paul and his client would have heard by now. And just having been around this stuff for a long time now, I'm also challenged to see how anybody would come up with a refusal recommendation if this were to move ahead as is. I think we're into the, I think bluntly speaking, we're into the arguing about the details of it. And that's something where I am at least glad that Paul has been much more open than some developers to meeting with residents and seeing where they can make the changes on things that are not zoning considerations, but that would still affect the quality of life for residents around.
Thanks, Jeff. Okay, next. Has there been any impact studies done on other instances where an apartment building was built in a previous R1 single family lot?
Not that I'm aware of. No.
Okay. Just a comment regarding parking. Experience on our street is you have to coordinate with bylaw parking enforcement, especially during snowstorm cleanup for units without parking, as otherwise people do try to park and they mess up the snow plowing. It's just a comment. Okay, we have a couple of comments are quite long. And I think they might go beyond this discussion tonight, but I will read them anyway. Jeff just mentioned density and affordability. How does this address affordability for families? We are removing a starter home for a family that is currently being rented and replacing it with small units that, to my understanding, would not reasonably house a family. If this was a development for 3 or 4 units that could conceivably house a family, I would understand, but how is this type of density required on a residential street? I believe there was a similar development a few streets over.
Yeah, so I just want to caution residents, even though I'm supportive of this or what I've seen thus far, and I don't anticipate hearing much that will change my mind. My job is still to help you put your best foot forward. This is a residential building on a residential street. I've received a lot of notes that would seem to indicate that somehow an apartment building is not residential. These are homes for people. And I know I and my colleagues, our backs do tend to get up when people express sentiments that are treating renters as a different class of resident on the street. These are residential units on a residential street, and that's what City Council wants to see. The affordability question with respect to the loss of family units is a tough one. I don't have a good answer for you tonight. That if this were to, this single starter home is not necessarily going to be an affordable home for even it's like as it is today for all but the most affluent residents of Ottawa. Affordable homes, starter homes for multi-person households are just not in our ward anymore. We've gentrified. People are having to go to places like Avalon and get a townhome. Barhaven, Canada, greenfield suburban developments in order to try to afford a home. And some folks obviously are skipping Ottawa altogether. They're jumping over the border into Carleton Place. They're jumping over the border into Carlsbad Springs and similar places. The question of affordable homes for multi-person households is bigger than this house here. The opportunity to house 10 people here instead of one multi-person household here is compelling. We need more housing of every single type, and intensifying so that more people are able to live car-free, close to amenities, is a real priority for the city. So on balance, I'm comfortable that replacing a single detached home with 10 units of housing is a good trade-off. But how we deal with ensuring that there is affordable housing for multiple person households is a big challenge. But it's not going to be solved by maintaining one single family home that is immediately adjacent to the metro and this close to LRT in the place where we really need a lot more people to live.
Thank you. Okay, we have a question from Dave. He asks, how can we contribute to defining the quote, edge, unquote, of the neighborhood? Garrison Street is not Kirkwood, Churchill, or Byron.
Yeah, so Dave, that'll be, so the edge of the neighborhood, like how far back does the traditional Main Street go, is a different discussion from the three streets that you've mentioned. So there has already been for quite some time, like even in the previous official plan, a notion that the traditional Main Street can extend as much as 150 meters back. We won't know what they're proposing the edge will be, however, until they come out with the map. Once the map comes out, then there's going to be over a year of consultation and discussion, and the community associations are all going to have lots of opportunities to suggest and lobby their councillors and lobby staff for proposed changes to the map. But I absolutely get that the edge is not, the edge here is not the same as the edge on Kirkwood. Kirkwood is a big, fast arterial street. This is not a big, fast arterial street, but the traditional Main Street extends back from the TM or from the street by a significant amount. The question will be by how much. Clearly, the traditional Main Street, I think in the minds of most planning observers, would go at least as far back as Garrison. The question is, will it go any further? For example, Spencer, is that the boundary from Wellington, where stuff that is south of Spencer can be denser than what's north? A lot of unanswered questions there, and we won't know until we see a zoning map. But when we do see that zoning map, a year's worth of conversation and discussion, and you'll have lots of opportunities to assert the association's perspective.
Okay, we're down to just a couple more questions, and given the time, it's 8 o'clock. Well, I think let's try and address these, and if I don't see anything else, I'll respectfully suggest we wrap it up. A question, what is to prevent height creep facing the R3 properties for this entire block?
So again, I think this is a question for me as opposed to the developer, but I think the question here is, if you're going to allow 3 stories in this block, what's to say that similar blocks won't start to see 4 or 5? Now, if these properties were assembled with the diner, Katie's house and Carolyn's house, then I think you would probably see 6 stories in this area as part of a much denser, taller development. But as long as it continues to develop at the low-rise scale, I think you're going to see that the zoning is going to continue to be like the R4 zoning. The R4 zoning is probably going to continue to have a 3-story height limit on it in neighborhoods like this. I know the fear is going to be there, but we had a very deliberate process to take a look at the height limits in the R4, I guess probably 2 years ago now, when we were doing the Mechanicsville, Westboro, Vanier R4. We chose 3 stories as the limit, anticipating what the new official plan was going to say. And so whatever the new equivalent of the R4 is, I would anticipate it will continue to have that 11-meter height limit.
Okay, thanks, Jeff. Next question, does the developer have other such projects in the works for the area?
Amjad, do you want to answer that?
Currently, no. I don't believe he has any other project in the area.
Okay. Next question. How does this much densification help with the urban heat island that our area is, especially when trees will have a net loss?
That's a good question. And that's the balance we're going to have to try to achieve in the comprehensive zoning bylaw review. The biggest cause of heat is greenhouse gases and climate change. And intensification is the key response that municipalities right across North America are instituting to try to mitigate the effects of climate change. It takes somewhere around 400 trees to offset the greenhouse gases emitted by the average Canadian when they drive for a year. So in 1 year, the average Canadian drives enough to require 400 trees to offset the greenhouse gases. When people live in neighborhoods like this, car-free or driving as little as possible. I know most of us on this call probably don't drive very often at all. Because of the neighborhood that we live in, and we can walk everywhere, we can cycle everywhere, we can take transit to a lot of our locations. You're saving the need to try to preserve 400, 500 trees. A single tree here and there really, it doesn't have the climate impact that you achieve when you intensify. Lots of lots that have smaller houses on them with bigger yards and lots of trees, the balance of that is to increase greenhouse gases, because then you need to sprawl. We have been pursuing that planning course since the post-war period. And look where we are today. We're 17 degrees or 16 degrees today because of climate change. But I don't want to dismiss that when you lose trees, that it exacerbates heat sink, and more heat is getting bounced back off of asphalt and off the pavement into the air, increasing the heat. That increases the requirement for cooling. That cooling is often based on fossil fuels, and so you have a vicious circle. So I think I mentioned earlier, Westboro has the new infill zoning that we anticipate doing some version of through the rest of what we call the interurban transect as we do the comprehensive zoning bylaw review. I am very interested. This is one of the biggest questions we have is that working? What does it mean for the tree canopy? Are we leaving enough room to put trees in place? And if not, when we do the comprehensive zoning bylaw review, what do we need to tweak from the Westboro R3R stuff in order to try to maintain more trees if we're losing too many of them? I'm concerned that in Westboro, the front trees aren't going in at all in many cases, unless the councillor's office is driving to get that done. The courtyard treatment that we were anticipating creating, where you have these spaces in the back of the building that would support big mature canopy trees. People are putting pools back there instead. Well, that doesn't help. So it's a legit question. On the whole, intensification is our most critical response to climate change. But at a very micro level, there are legitimate questions to be asked as to whether or not the zoning we're anticipating doing is going to preserve enough trees to mitigate the heat sink. No answer for you tonight.
Okay. Another question about garbage. I have a feeling, Paul or Amjad, you don't know the answer to this, or maybe you do. Would garbage pickup be more often than every second week?
Well, that would be determined, of course, on the usage of the tenants of this building in the future, and that's something the owner has to make the decision on that regard.
If it's city pickup, it'll be the same schedule as everybody else on the block. But I think what Amjad's saying is, if it's a private pickup, then if the demand is there, then it would be picked up more often than every other week.
Okay, and this next question, actually, it's more of a comment regarding neighborhood character. It reads, Jeff, shouldn't families making the biggest financial decision of their lives have some expectation of maintaining the character of their neighborhood? Because that is why they made that choice. We did not choose to live downtown. It is not like we moved next to a church and then complain about the bells ringing. Seems like the deck is completely stacked against us.
Yeah, so there is no protection with respect to the character of the neighborhood. You don't have the right to preserve your neighborhood as a neighborhood of nothing but single family homes. There are bigger, broader sustainability questions in play. This city will not be economically or environmentally sustainable without intensification. And on balance, that is the more important consideration. What I would agree with you on, though, is that you should understand when you make a decision to purchase a home, what is going to be possible. So the zoning that we see through much of Kitchissippi has been around since 1968. In one form or another, it's essentially post-war planning, and the zoning has not kept up with constantly iterating official plans. The province has told us you have to intensify. The province has told us you're going to intensify to the largest extent where you have higher order transit, and we're required to create an official plan that demonstrates to the province how we're going to meet that provincial policy. And so intensification, such that the majority of our growth will be in the areas that are already serviced, is a provincial requirement. The problem is that we don't update the zoning when we have a new official plan. So the comprehensive zoning bylaw that I'm speaking about a lot tonight is the first time since amalgamation that we're creating a new zoning bylaw. And much of that amalgamation zoning bylaw is a holdover from the late 1960s. So when families are buying a house in a neighborhood that has zoning that matches official plans and planning principles in place in the 60s, they're naturally upset when the zoning is updated to reflect what the official plan says now. I think the city has to do a much better job of keeping its zoning up to date so that people have a much better idea of what they can expect. But ultimately, at the end of the day, no, the character of a neighborhood, whether you live next to a low-rise apartment building that's 3 stories tall, or whether you live next to a triplex that's 3 stories tall, or whether you live next to a single detached house that's 2 stories tall, is not protection that you can ever count on. The neighborhoods evolve, neighborhoods change, and if we wanted to protect the character of our neighborhoods, the only way to do that is really to continue to sprawl. And on a day when it got 16 degrees on March 4th, I think we all understand why sprawl is unacceptable.
Thanks, Jeff. Okay, folks, we've gone through all the questions that were submitted, and there were some comments that I did make note of. And given the time and the fact that there are no other questions, I think we're going to wrap it up here. Paul and Amjad, I'd like to say thank you very much for attending tonight and responding to all the questions. And to the residents, this is just the beginning, really your first opportunity to ask questions. There are going to be other opportunities. As Paul mentioned, there's going to be a sign going up on the site once the application is submitted. You'll be able to submit questions and comments to the planner at the city. And there will also be a planning and housing committee meeting where the public is welcome to make presentation and provide comments as well. So having said that, I'm going to wrap things up and also just remind everyone that the meeting is being recorded. So if you want to go back and review something, or if you have a neighbor who couldn't attend, please let them know that this will be available for viewing. We will be posting it in a few days. And if you can't find the link, or your neighbor can't find the link, please feel free to reach out to our office. And also, if you have any other questions that you think of after the meeting, please feel free to reach out to us. You can reach me at alice.fife@ottawa.ca, or send it to Jeff's inbox, and I'll see it there as well. It's jeff.leapier@ottawa.ca. So with that, I would like to say thanks again to everyone for coming tonight, and have a good evening. Thanks a lot. Goodbye,
Thank you very
everyone.
much.
Okay,
Thank you,
bye-bye.
Alice. Good
Thank you
job.
very
Good
much.
night.
Bye.
Good night.
Bye.
Good night.